What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Before we start this video, I'd like to give a special thanks to the artist featured therein. She has created a custom art piece for this particular video that will be used as the thumbnail, and she has recorded herself doing so. Her name is Jess, and you can find a link to her social media in the description of the video. Please be sure to go check her out and give her some love and support, as she's really doing a great service to this channel. If you guys end up enjoying this video and the stories therein, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you think of the stories in the video, if you feel so inclined. Last but not least, before we get into it, if you guys would like to support the channel, you can go ahead and check the link in my description to my Patreon. There are 4 different tiers. The lowest one is only $1, and if you'd like to keep this channel going for a long time to come, any amount you can contribute would be greatly appreciated. If everyone watching this donated just $1, I'd be able to keep doing this for years to come. Anyway, let's get right into the video, and I hope you guys enjoy today's scary stories. This was about a year ago on my first time camping. Not at a designated tent campground either. I still considered myself a fairly experienced camper, because I did everything any other camper would do. The only difference is I didn't have to hike out to anywhere, and there would usually be a lot more people around. Some people would have their whole elaborate campsite setup with tables and all that, but I always kept it minimal. Eventually, I got the urge to go camp somewhere on my own, not around a ton of people. Get to experience more of the quiet nature side of camping. The trail I chose was 2 hours long. There weren't too many pictures, but I thought it seemed good enough from what I did see. I started the hike a few hours after the sun came up in the morning. The parking lot was empty though. In fact, it wasn't really much of a parking lot at all, more like a small dirt area just off the road. Everything went well for the first little while. It was honestly just a regular hike out into the woods. But about 30 minutes into the hike, I saw a man on the trail ahead of me. He was far down, moving through the trees. After just a minute, I'd basically caught up to him. This guy was moving incredibly slowly. I'm not trying to say that in a mean way, mind you, but more so like he was purposefully going astronomically slow. Usually, I wouldn't want to pass by anyone going in the same direction, and would instead just take a breather and walk slower myself, to let them get further ahead. But he was moving so slowly that I kind of had no choice but to pass him by. I casually said hello as I started to walk around him, but when I got next to him, he suddenly started going at a perfectly normal pace, matching my speed immediately. He began to ask how my day was going. I looked over really confused at first at how weird this was. Then the guy reached out his hand for a handshake and said his name was Oscar. I shook his hand and we started a conversation. I wasn't opposed to talking to anyone, but it was just the way in which it started that made me feel off about this whole thing. At least at first. Once we'd started talking though, Oscar just seemed like a normal, chill guy. We chatted for the next 30 minutes. I noticed he didn't have a backpack or any equipment, and asked him why. He said he was actually already set up out there, and was just going on a walk at the moment. He said he'd made his campsite in the trees, a little way past the technical spot for camping where I was headed. At some point, I mentioned I was newish to this type of thing. Oscar said he'd been to this place bunches of times, and it was perfect for a newcomer like myself. If I wanted, I could stop by his campsite later and have dinner with him. I agreed, thinking it would be cool, and a great way to make a new camping friend. When we got to the campground, I started setting up my stuff, and Oscar continued walking into the trees to his campsite. I couldn't see it from where I was set up at, but I assumed it must just be a few minutes further into the forest. The rest of the day, about 5 or 6 hours, I was all alone at the campground, enjoying the quiet forest around me. No signs of Oscar or any other campers or hikers. coming up to the campground. It wasn't until the sun started going down that Oscar came out of the trees and walked up to my area. He asked me how everything was going, and we talked for a few minutes. Then he asked if I wanted to come chill at his campfire and have something to eat. I said sure and followed him away from my tent and into the trees. I did have this feeling in the back of my head that this was all a bit strange. I'd just met this guy and was now following him deeper into the forest, but it felt like I would have been able to read if he really was a weird guy. Aside from the slow walking situation, there didn't seem anything off about him at all. I walked behind him for about 5 minutes, getting much deeper into the woods than I was expecting, before I could see his campfire glowing through the trees. We went up to it, but something immediately put me off. Oscar wasn't out there alone. There were 2 other guys sitting at the campsite around the fire. He had never once mentioned them. Not that I had asked, of course, but I thought it was weird he never brought it up at all, especially after inviting me over. They all greeted me though, and now I was already too far in to bring it up or leave without making things uncomfortable. I sat down next to all of them. The men weren't cooking anything fancy, just some packets of ramen boiling the water over the fire. The first few minutes were fine. We all just talked, casual small talk. But after that, things got really quiet. Oscar was the one boiling the water, and the rest of us were just kinda sitting there. The forest had also gotten quiet and dark as well. It was like the forest itself was telling me something was wrong. Every time I would look up at these men, their eyes would immediately shift away from me, like I'd just caught them watching. Hey, I think I'm gonna head back to my camp to grab something from my bag. Save me a bowl, though. I'll be right back. I said it in the most casual way possible, to not make it too obvious I was trying to leave and not return. Oscar didn't even look up. The other 2 men didn't say a word either. They just looked at me. After an uncomfortable and tense few moments, I turned around and started to walk away. I only made it a few steps before the eerie silence was interrupted by the men moving behind me. I looked back over my shoulder. The 2 guys were now standing up staring at me. Oscar didn't look up at all. I didn't look for too long before continuing to walk away. The next minute, as I was walking further, I got this horrible, dreadful feeling lurking behind me. I wanted to look, but I was scared. Once I got far enough, the feeling was too much for me to handle. I finally did turn around again. I was far from their campsite now, but the fire glowing through the forest was still visible. I could see the logs we had been sitting on, but all 3 men were nowhere to be seen. I made a dead sprint back to the campground where my tent was. Once I made it, I started to quickly take everything down. The paranoia of not knowing where the men went, and possibly being out in the dark somewhere, jumping out at any minute, made me abandon everything and just run. I followed the trail, not stopping until I got all the way back to where I'd parked. As I drove out, I called the police. I had no real evidence to prove the men were up to something, but I still wanted the police to investigate. They drove down to the trail, and while they didn't go down to the campsite, the officers did confirm there were no other vehicles parked anywhere. Those men had clearly not driven there, and there was no way to know how long they'd been out there for. I can't say exactly what those men intended, but I think when everything is put all together, it's clear that they had something really awful planned for me that night. We went camping at a state park that was a couple of hours' trip from home one weekend. It was me, my parents, my uncle, and my younger cousin. By the time we turned in for the night, it was close to midnight, and I was ready for bed. Sometime later that night, I woke up needing to use the restroom. I grabbed a flashlight and headed out into the woods to pee in some privacy. As I was doing so, though, I heard this dull tapping noise a bit farther out into the woods. I turned my flashlight on and pointed it in the direction of the sound, but the beam didn't reach very far. I don't know why, but I moved closer to it. I should have just gone back to the tent, but I was curious as to what the sound could be. I knew there were no other campsites out that way. Instead, I stepped between the trees and moved closer to the noise. After walking for a few minutes, the noise was getting louder. Eventually, I got closer, and my flashlight revealed a man standing near a tree. He had obviously seen my light and was now looking toward me. I didn't have much time to take in the scene before the man began to move in my direction. I could still see it clear enough, though, and it was disgusting. With the back of an axe, since that's what he had in his hand, he had hammered these dismembered body parts to different trees around him. That explained the tapping sound I'd been hearing, either his axe or a hammer hitting the back of a nail. I ran and didn't think about what direction I went. I just took off running. Branches hit my arms and face, and I could hear him chasing behind me at first. Not long after that, though, I stopped hearing him altogether. Still, I kept going, trying to run as fast as I could to get away. I had totally lost myself in the woods, and I spent the rest of the night moving in circles. Eventually, after the sun had come up, I heard my family faintly in the distance, calling out for me. I was able to meet up with them after walking towards them for quite a while. My family already had a ranger or police officer with them. I don't remember exactly which one, because I was so exhausted. The ranger or officer or whoever they were searched the woods for a while after we had left, supposedly, but never found any of those dismembered body parts in the woods. That night in the woods single-handedly made me one of the least curious people in the world now. I learned to just let things be and not investigate anything. I was about 11 when this happened. My parents left me and my younger brother at my uncle's place for a weekend while they were out of town. His house sat at the edge of a long stretch of forest with a wide-open clearing behind it, which was close to a local park. There weren't any neighbors really that close, as they lived about 1,000 feet away. I liked going there because my cousin Matt lived with my uncle. He was older, 19 years old, and treated me like I wasn't just a little kid. We'd mess around outside, ride ATVs, fire airsoft guns, and sometimes just sit in the garage, listening to music. That night, my uncle left at around 8 p.m. for a night shift at work. By 11 p.m., my brother was asleep in the spare room, and Matt had knocked out on the couch while the TV was still on. I couldn't sleep, however, as I'd had too much soda and junk food. After a while, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and slipped out the back door, thinking I'd go out into the clearing in the forest and fire my airsoft gun for a while. There was a path behind the yard that cut through the trees and eventually opened into the clearing in the woods near the park. We'd walked it a bunch of times during the day, but at night it felt much longer. When I reached the clearing, I began picking up some of the leftover cans we had used before and propped them up on some plastic buckets we had set up. The park was closed in the winter, so we didn't have to worry about leaving things out. I began shooting at my targets for about 15 minutes or so. As I was reloading more pellets into the chamber of my gun, I heard frozen debris crunching on my right. I immediately stopped what I was doing and looked over. The sound was coming from somewhere on the bike path. I should have just turned around and went back to the house immediately at this point. However, my 11-year-old mind was always curious and adventurous, so I decided to investigate. Plus, I had my airsoft gun, so I felt invincible. I advanced down the path a few dozen feet, looking around to see what was making the noise. As I was shining my flashlight around some bushes, I heard somebody humming rather quietly. It was at that point that all the courage from me started to drain, and common sense began to kick in. I was about to consider turning around and running when I heard footsteps coming my way through the woods. I pointed my flashlight in the direction of where the footsteps were coming from. Based on all the details I still remember, the figure was that of a tall, thin, seemingly middle-aged female. Her apparel was just odd as well, complete opposite of what a normal woman would be wearing in winter weather. She was wearing a long-sleeve black satin dress that draped just past her knees, and black high-heeled shoes. Keep in mind, it was almost 10 below freezing that night. Once she saw me, she stood still with her eyes locked on to mine. One thing I do remember clearly was the expression on that woman's face. She had a look of satisfaction and malice. It was clearly an unsettling sight. Not knowing what to do or think of at the moment, I cleared my throat and tried to speak to her. I said hello. 10 seconds later, the woman started to make these weird, wet, sucking noises with her mouth. It sounded like she was chewing on something very messily or something. She then followed with this big, toothy smile, laughing as her eyes continued to focus on me. It began to strike me that this woman might be on some sort of substance and could be potentially dangerous. I took a few steps back, as I was now very nervous. The woman raised her right arm up from her side and began to beckon me over with her index finger. "Come here." I screamed, dropped my airsoft gun, spun around, and ran back into the clearing, then through the path in the woods back toward my uncle's house. While I was running, I looked over my shoulder, and to my horror, I saw the woman was chasing after me. I could not believe this woman could run so fast, despite the fact she had high heels on, especially through the woods on an uneven path. I was about 30 feet away from exiting the woods back to my uncle's lawn when I took another brief glance over my shoulder again. She was really, really close to me now, and I knew that she was going to catch me before I could make it across the whole lawn. Suddenly, right as we reached the grass of the yard, I heard the woman let out a loud gasp, not an exhausted one, but more one of sudden surprise, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the ground and someone getting the wind knocked out of them. I looked back just long enough to see the woman lying flat. She must have slipped on the slick grass or tripped over something. Thankfully, this gave me an advantage. I continued running until I made it to the house. As I slammed the sliding door shut, I woke my cousin Matt up and quickly blurted out what just happened to me. He took his revolver out of the closet and searched around outside the house and yard. The lady had disappeared by then, and he wasn't going to go into the woods looking for her. The next day, my cousin and a buddy of his went through the woods to the clearing to recover my airsoft gun. Thankfully, it was still there. They didn't see anything out of the normal, but I was scolded slightly the next day about my decision to go out to the clearing alone the night prior. I still don't understand what that woman was doing out there that night. The only thing I know is that she was crazy and clearly had bad intentions for me. I always consider myself lucky, because if it hadn't been for that woman just falling over, I might not have made it back to the house before she grabbed me, and I would be completely at her mercy. I was heading out to a cabin with a good friend, Adam. His family had this place out in the mountains that they used as a vacation cabin, and usually they went there at some point during the winter. For some reason or another, the rest of his family didn't want to go this year, though. Since it would be empty, Adam invited me, and we thought it'd be chill to have the cabin to ourselves and just hang out a while. We drove out there together and got to the place at around noon. I'd never been there before, so I wasn't entirely sure what exactly to expect. It was a pretty big cabin, not like one of those tiny old ones. This one looked newer and larger, basically a house, to be honest with you. Adam had been there multiple times, but this was his first time not going with family. Working everything was kind of a nightmare to figure out. With a few calls to his parents, we were able to get the place functioning and everything up and running. Though that night, we didn't do much because we were tired from the 6-hour drive. We went to bed and got up to find the cabin snowed in. Got about 6 inches of snow overnight, and it was still coming down hard. We stayed in, enjoying the cabin and the calmness. Honestly, just doing what we'd usually do at home. Watching TV, talking, whatever. That night, we turned on the football game and started drinking a bit. Just a few beers, nothing too crazy. At some point, we both heard something outside, though. It sounded almost exactly like a man coughing. We both shot our heads up and looked at the front door where we thought we'd heard that sound coming from. We were both very confused. Adam said there was no way someone would be out there. After a bit of hesitation, I got up and looked, but I didn't see anything. The front porch was completely empty. Ultimately, we both thought we must have just heard something else, joking that we were maybe a little more drunk than we'd thought, mistaking one of the natural sounds of the woods for somebody coughing. The idea that anyone could be out there where his cabin was and coughing outside of it was completely ridiculous. So we forgot about it pretty quickly. Once the game was over, we hung around the fireplace and had some beers and talked. We stayed up pretty late. I don't even have any idea what time we called it. Adam went to one of the bedrooms, and I stayed in the living room. There were a bunch of extra bedrooms, but I just sort of wanted to sleep on the couch next to the fireplace for that unique experience, I guess. Neither of us expected the heavy snow and sudden drop in temperature. The cabin wasn't really meant to be stayed in during extreme temperatures, so the regular home heater could only keep the place around 60 degrees. The fireplace, at least, made that much more bearable. Anyway, I grabbed a blanket and fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, though, Adam was whispering my name from the hallway. I looked over the couch, completely disoriented and confused. He looked the same as me. "Was that you?" I asked. "Was what me?" He looked a little more concerned, as I told him I'd been sleeping on the couch, not doing anything. Adam told me he swore he'd heard a door open and close and thought I'd left the cabin to go outside for some reason. Clearly, that was not the case. He went over to the door and checked it. It was locked up still. At this point, I thought he was just going crazy, maybe anxious from drinking a little too much, so I told him to chill out. The cabin was probably just creaking or something. He still looked concerned, like he really did believe what he'd heard, but agreed that he was probably just being crazy and headed back to the bedroom. I laid back down and closed my eyes, though after that I felt almost fully awake. I still didn't move or open my eyes for about 20 minutes. I kept listening to the wind outside the cabin and the sounds the cabin was making, but everything felt more eerie for some reason. After those 20 minutes of not being able to clear my head or fall asleep, I opened my eyes and sat up to reset. I instantly felt a shock go through me when I discovered the door was open, just slightly cracked, but it had been fully closed and locked when Adam had checked it. I literally couldn't believe my eyes. I got up and walked over. The cold wind shooting through the door made me shiver. I looked out, basically seeing nothing but darkness. I closed the door and was actually really nervous now, and I wanted to go tell Adam, but I didn't. I stood there and looked around the cabin, thinking about how this could even be possible. Were we both just going crazy? I then heard a thump against the side of the cabin. I moved toward the sound, and it happened again, but much louder. Loud enough to get Adam to leave his room and ask me what was going on. I shook my head that I didn't know. I mentioned the door. The thumps kept hammering the walls of the cabin from outside. Heavy, loud hits against the wood. It was very strange. It wasn't against a window or a back door either. It was just against the wall. There was no way either of us were going to go outside and see what that was. Not in the dark with a winter storm going on. Both of us went around checking windows and listening, but after a few minutes it was silent again. It stayed quiet for a half hour as we discussed what we thought was going on. Up to this point, neither of us had actually seen a person out there. Our heads were naturally coming up with any excuse to explain this, but then the thumping started again, hitting the side wall of the cabin near one of the bedrooms. It moved along the wall, not just staying in one spot. This went on for hours, with brief pauses for a bit, only for it to start up again. Through the whole night, we didn't know what to do. Just before sunrise, it finally stopped and did not start again. When the sun was up and with the snowfall slowing down, we both put on our jackets and went outside with knives in hand to look around. All over the outer walls were dents, scuffs, and scratches in the wood. It hardly looked natural. They were just hitting the wall for some unknown reason. Obviously, that morning we got out of there, not getting any answers or explanation. With the door being open in the middle of the night, now feeling a lot less coincidental, we felt very unsafe. It was a really big reality check for us, though. Because of course now, looking back on it, we really should have called the police. We were just young, and in the moment it was so strange and confusing that we didn't. I don't know what was happening or who was out in that forest by the cabin, but I think it's very clear they did not want us to be there. I live alone in a house that I'm currently renting. I don't know any of the neighbors at all. It's a populated neighborhood, where the yards are small and there are many houses stacked in rows. Not too long after I'd moved in, one time I ordered something online to be delivered. However, I never received it. Even after it said it had been dropped off, nothing was there, and I had no photos of the delivery from the company. I assumed it must have been sent to my old address or something by accident. If that was the case, I would not have been able to get it as it was too far away. So I decided to just order it again. A few days later, when it was delivered, I didn't know it had been delivered yet, but it was there. I was upstairs on the second floor of my place when I noticed something strange from a front window. I saw a woman exit the house directly across the street from mine. She walked through a front yard and basically made a beeline right to mine. She proceeded to walk right up to my front step. I was just standing there watching her. I don't think she even knew I was there, because she never once looked up at me. I thought she was going to knock on the door, but for what reason I couldn't possibly know. She went out of my sight when she got up to the front step. I couldn't see from that angle. Instead of knocking on the front door, though, I saw her come back into view seconds later, walking away holding a package. I realized that was my delivery. She was moving away really fast. My neighbor had just stolen my delivery. I took off running out of the room and down the stairs. When I got to the front door, the woman was already across the street entering her home. By the time I'd opened my door, she had just gotten inside. I marched right over and then banged on her front door. Moments later, she answered it, looking all confused. She was opening the door just a crack, like she was all defensive, and stuck her head out the corner. I told her I'd just seen her stealing my item. The woman claimed it was her package, and it had been delivered to my house by mistake. Not knowing 100% if my package had in fact been delivered yet, I stopped and thought for a moment. She got me to actually doubt myself there for a second. I told her that I'd just ordered it, and it was supposed to be delivered right now. She told me once more it was hers, and knew nothing further about it. She said she had to go and slammed the door shut, then locked it loudly. I went on my phone and checked my email. Sure enough, said my package had just been delivered, and no package was there now. I knew she had stolen it. I banged on the door. She didn't answer. I tried to reason with her. I yelled from the front step that if she could show me the package with her name on it, I would leave her alone. I stood there knocking on the door on and off for 10 minutes, but she refused to come out again. I was so mad. I didn't want to do anything crazy though, so I cooled down and calmly walked back to my place. That explained why I didn't get my delivery the first time. She had stolen that one too. I thought about calling the cops, but then decided to give her one last opportunity to come clean. She probably wouldn't get in that much trouble for just stealing a $30 package from me twice anyway. I went back to her house the following day. As to be expected, she did not answer, so I left a note. I know you stole my package. You have 48 hours to come clean before I get the police involved. Sincerely, your neighbor. Well, later that day, I got a knock at my door. I thought it would be the woman returning my package, but when I opened it, it was some man. I'd never seen him before. He said he was related to the woman across the street, maybe her husband or something. She was terribly upset, and he knew she was innocent. I told him the evidence, clear as day, but he had none of it. He stormed off, claiming that if I got the police involved, he would make my life miserable. Now, I should have gone to the cops right then and there, but that encounter made me want to try to catch that woman in the act. I went out and bought a security camera and positioned it on my front step. I ordered a package and purposefully left it out for a while. No luck. She probably saw the camera, maybe even saw me installing it. I tried to hide it, but there were no great hiding places to make it impossible to see. I decided to just let the matter go, as angry as I still was about it. Then one night I arrived home pretty late. When I did, for whatever reason, I glanced across the street. There was one light on in a front window, where I saw the woman staring at me from inside, with this furious look on her face. She was just glaring right at me. When we made eye contact, she didn't look away or anything. I turned away and walked inside. When I got to a front window in the house and looked out, I saw she was still staring at me. It was really creepy. After 10 minutes, she finally moved away. That was the last time I saw her. I haven't seen her or her husband since then, and that was almost a year ago now. I'm not aware of them moving out or anything, as the same car is still in their driveway, but I haven't seen them in any capacity. I probably won't live here too much longer, as I'm looking at places across town. I just hope I never see that woman again. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. The first thing we gotta do at the end of the video is thank every single Patreon subscriber who has subscribed to the credits tier. So without further ado, let's thank them. Grace Demarest, Billy Cadret, Katie O'Brien, Caitlin, Amy Jensen, Deborah Alexander, Stephen Dahlberg, Gary Family, Jessica GB, and Nick Poyer. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. I really appreciate everything you're doing. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any stories you'd like to submit of your own, please be sure to check for my email in the description of the video. It's bluespookyreadings@gmail.com. You can go ahead and send me a message on there, and I'll try to read your story as soon as possible. Please try to make sure it has proper grammar, spacing, etc., as that gives your story the highest chances of being read on this channel. Anyway though, guys, I think that's pretty much all for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.